He didn't even look me in the eye when he said it. "You've overstayed your welcome." Then the door slammed behind me, leaving me on the porch with nothing but a duffel bag and the sting of betrayal. My own brother, the man who once promised we were family no matter what, had just turned his back on me when I needed him most. I had no home, no job, and barely any cash, but I had one thing: determination. And exactly 1 year later, he walked into a sleek new office and froze when he saw me at the head of the table. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments, which country are you watching from? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story where karma hits exactly right. I always knew there was a sharp difference between being family by blood and being family by heart, but nothing could have prepared me for the day I found myself standing on my brother's porch with nowhere to go. Just a week before, we'd been laughing in that same living room, reminiscing about our childhood, watching old home videos. I truly believed that staying with Adil while I got back on my feet was a blessing, an act of brotherly love. But over time, it became clear that my presence was no longer welcome. The morning he told me to leave, he didn't yell or curse. He simply said, "You've overstayed your welcome," and walked away like I was some tenant whose lease had run out. No explanation, no empathy, just cold dismissal. At the time, I had nothing. I had been laid off 2 months earlier from a mid-level marketing job after the company downsized. My savings were drained from helping pay our late mother's medical bills before she passed. And moving in with Adil was supposed to be temporary, just a few months until I got back on track. But as the weeks went on, the energy in the house shifted. His wife, Rabia, started avoiding me. Meals became cold and silent. My offers to contribute, whether by buying groceries or helping clean, were always brushed off with a tight-lipped "it's fine," until it wasn't. Until I was told to pack up and leave. I stood outside his gate with 2 duffel bags, blinking back a cocktail of shame, heartbreak, and fury. I called a friend from college, Salman, who lived across town in a tiny studio. He didn't hesitate. "Come over. You can crash on the couch as long as you need." That small act of kindness kept me from sinking into despair. Salman didn't ask for explanations or judge me for being kicked out by my own brother. He just opened the door, and that door became the start of everything. At Salman's place, there was no privacy and barely enough space to walk without bumping into furniture. But there was one thing I found again. My mind, with nothing else to do, I started thinking, replaying everything I'd been through over the past year, losing my job, watching my mother's health decline, feeling myself slowly disappear into silence. But when you hit rock bottom, there's only one direction left to go: up. I stopped sulking and started writing ideas. At night, while Salman slept, I'd be on the floor with a notepad and pen, scribbling out rough plans. One idea kept recurring: a marketing and branding agency focused on helping small businesses grow with limited budgets. I had seen too many small shops and startups flounder just because they didn't know how to position themselves. I knew their pain, I knew their panic, and I knew I could help. I used to manage multi-thousand-dollar campaigns. Now I wanted to take those skills and make them accessible to the little guys. I called the idea Ground Up Creative, because that's where I was starting, from the ground up. With Salman's help, I created a basic website using a free builder. I emailed 200 small businesses in the city, offering a free consultation. Out of 200, only 5 responded. Of those 5, 3 agreed to give me a try. I didn't charge much, barely enough for dinner some days, but I poured everything I had into those clients. I built websites, wrote product descriptions, designed logos, ran modest ad campaigns, all with minimal tools and my outdated laptop. But the work was good. No, it was excellent. And those 3 clients brought me my first 5-star reviews, which I showcased like trophies on the homepage. Within 3 months, I had a steady stream of clients. Nothing grand yet, but enough to rent a tiny co-working space and replace my dying laptop. That space became my sanctuary. Every day, I showed up like it was a corner office on the 30th floor. I dressed the part, printed my own business cards, and networked like my life depended on it, because in a way it did. Slowly, word spread. One bakery recommended me to a florist. A boutique mentioned me to a cafe owner. Within 6 months, I was managing campaigns for over a dozen clients, but none of this came easy. There were nights I went without dinner, days I couldn't afford the bus fare, and walked miles to client meetings in the summer heat. I worked through migraines and colds, ignored texts from old friends who only messaged to gossip about how Adil had finally cut me off. And through it all, I kept my focus razor sharp. I promised myself I would never again depend on someone who could turn me away like trash on the curb. I still saw my brother's social media from time to time. He and Rabia were vacationing in Turkey. They'd posted pictures of their new SUV, dinners at fancy places, filtered family brunches where they looked like the perfect couple. Adil had always been the golden child, calm, charming, good at saving face. I, on the other hand, was the rebel, the wanderer, the one who couldn't hold a job. According to family lore, he was the success story, I was the afterthought. But deep down, I knew the truth, and soon so would everyone else. By the end of the first year, Ground Up Creative had expanded to 4 employees. I had hired 2 interns and 1 part-time developer. We moved into a bigger office, modest but professional. I still remembered walking past office towers downtown and dreaming of a nameplate with my logo on a glass door. Now it was reality. One day, I got an inquiry from a mid-sized real estate company. They were looking for a full-service marketing revamp. Branding, content, ad campaigns, social media, the works. I scheduled a pitch meeting. When I walked into the conference room, I froze. Sitting at the head of the table, representing the client, was none other than Adil. He looked up, and his expression flickered, from disbelief to discomfort to something that might have been guilt. Rabia was there too, her lips parted slightly in shock. They hadn't realized it was my company they'd contacted. I smiled calmly and introduced myself like a professional. Good afternoon, I'm the founder and creative lead at Ground Up. Let's begin. I walked out of that meeting room with a fire burning in my chest. Adil hadn't said a word to me during the entire presentation, but the stunned silence that filled the room when I introduced myself said everything. The rest of the team, the marketing director, HR head, and a couple of junior executives, were too busy scribbling notes and nodding at the pitch to notice the history between us. I delivered the proposal with practiced confidence, walking them through data, samples, and projections with laser precision. If there was any hesitation in me, I buried it so deep even I couldn't find it. But Adil, he couldn't hide it. The moment he saw me standing there, his carefully maintained image cracked. I could see the questions swirl in his mind. How, when, and most importantly, how did he get this far without me knowing? That night I went home and sat on my couch. Still that same old apartment I had rented after Salman helped me get on my feet. I didn't celebrate or gloat. I just sat quietly and let the moment wash over me. Because it wasn't about revenge, it was about reclamation. I remembered how humiliated I felt standing on his porch with my bags. How small I felt every time I had to explain to distant relatives why I was still figuring things out. And now my work spoke for itself. My company had grown from a side hustle built on broken pride to a real, respected business. We had a client list that stretched across industries, from bakeries and salons to architects and accountants. And now, ironically, Adil's real estate firm wanted in. The next day, I received a follow-up email from the firm's HR lead. They loved the proposal and wanted to move forward with a 6-month contract. She attached a list of requirements, timelines, and a message. Our CEO, Mr. Adil, looks forward to working with your team. I almost laughed out loud, so he was going to pretend like none of it happened. Fine by me, I wasn't doing this for personal closure. I was doing this for the business I had built from nothing. When I walked into our office the next morning, I gathered the team and told them we had landed the real estate contract. Cheers and applause erupted around the small conference table. We're going to treat this just like any other client. I said, "Professional, excellent, efficient, no corners cut, got it." They nodded eagerly. None of them knew about my connection to Adil, and I didn't tell them. Over the next few weeks, our teams worked closely. Adil's company provided access to branding assets, property photos, and outdated marketing materials. We revamped everything: logo, color scheme, digital presence. My graphic designer created sleek new visuals, while my copywriter worked on taglines that were simple but impactful: property, purpose, precision. It sounded like a real estate empire now, not a family-run agency stuck in the 2000s. During one meeting, Adil finally spoke directly to me. We were going over ad campaign metrics when he cleared his throat. "I have to admit," he said, glancing down at the papers in front of him, "your team is good. This is more progress than we've made in the last 2 years." He didn't smile and his tone was stiff, but the words were real. I simply replied, "That's what we're here for." I could tell he was trying to gauge me, waiting for me to make a snide remark to bring up the past. But I didn't. I wanted him to feel the difference between us now, not just in success, but in spirit. I wasn't the same brother he kicked out with a dismissive wave. I was a man who rebuilt himself without bitterness. Behind closed doors, though, things got complicated. Rabia pulled me aside after a presentation one afternoon. Her voice was lower than usual, less guarded. "You've changed," she said carefully. "Adil didn't think you'd land on your feet like this. None of us did." I didn't answer immediately. What could I say to that? "Thank you for your low expectations," she continued. "He's not a bad person, just proud, and maybe a little ashamed now." I gave her a small nod. "That's his burden to carry. I've already carried mine." As the weeks went on, the success of the campaign became undeniable. Engagement on their website tripled. Their new social media pages were buzzing with inquiries. They booked out half their listings within a month. My team had delivered results, just like I promised, and now even the firm's board had started noticing the shift. I received a call from one of the senior partners who commended our team and hinted at a long-term retainer offer. That was the moment I knew this wasn't a fluke. This was our breakthrough. I thought about telling Salman all of it, about the poetic twist that brought Adil to my doorstep, professionally speaking, but I held back. He'd supported me when I was at my lowest, offering space, food, and peace. I didn't want to turn this journey into a "look who's laughing now" story, because deep down I wasn't laughing. I was just finally breathing. Then came the client appreciation event, a formal gathering organized by the real estate company to celebrate the success of the campaign. Adil insisted I attend as the guest of honor. It was the first time in over a year that I'd be seeing the extended family again. My aunts, uncles, cousins, all the people who'd quietly judged me when Adil pushed me out, who never reached out or asked if I was okay. I arrived wearing a tailored navy suit, the kind that makes you walk a little taller. My team was already there, mingling and networking like seasoned pros. When I walked in, conversations paused for just a beat. I caught the looks, the subtle surprise, the whispered updates. "That's his company. He built that." I smiled and greeted everyone politely, like nothing had ever happened. Adil raised a toast in front of everyone. This evening wouldn't have been possible without the brilliance and hard work of ground-up creative. We were stuck, and they got us unstuck. "Thank you." He raised his glass to me, and this time I saw something new in his eyes. Not pity, not dismissal, but respect. After the event, as guests filed out and the music softened, Adil approached me outside near the valet stand. "I owe you an apology," he said, looking me square in the eye, "for how I treated you, for not believing in you." I took a deep breath. "I'm not angry anymore, Adil. I've let it go. He hesitated. "I didn't think you'd be the one to build something like this. You always seemed like the dreamer, not the builder. And maybe I had to be kicked out to start building," I said quietly. He gave a small laugh, genuine this time. "Well, you built something impressive. Mom would have been proud." I nodded. She would have. As I drove away that night, I realized something powerful. Success is not about proving others wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you were always right to believe in your own potential, and sometimes the very people who pushed you down become the ones who have to rise to meet you again. I didn't need revenge. I had something better: peace, purpose, and a legacy I created with my own two hands. Success is a quiet kind of justice, the kind that doesn't demand recognition, but still commands it. That realization sank in the day I walked into the Regional Entrepreneurs Summit as a keynote speaker and saw Adil seated in the second row, arms crossed, flanked by two of his board members. He didn't know I'd be speaking. He was there to represent his company as part of a panel. His expression froze the moment I stepped onto the stage, but I didn't falter. I looked past him, toward the sea of unfamiliar faces, and delivered the speech I had been preparing for months. From rock bottom to boardroom, building when you have nothing. I told him my story without bitterness or theatrics. I spoke about being broke, sleeping on a mattress with no frame, hustling in online forums to find my first clients, bartering services just to get my foot in the door. I spoke about using rejection as fuel and how pain was the tuition I paid for success. I didn't mention Adil by name, but every word echoed with the truth he knew too well, that the man he once discarded had become a force on his own. When I ended the talk, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Cameras flashed, hands clapped, and people lined up to speak with me after. Adil didn't approach. He stayed seated for a while, then slipped out quietly before the event wrapped. But his absence said more than any confrontation could. He couldn't face me, not because he hated me, but because he finally saw me. A week later, I received an email invitation to attend a closed investment round hosted by one of the largest development groups in the city. I thought it was a mistake at first until I realized my recent projects had gained visibility and word of mouth was doing what cold emails never could. My company was no longer an underdog. It was being taken seriously. We were no longer pitching to survive. We were being courted to expand. This would have been the moment to call Adil, to tell him I no longer needed him or his validation. But that wasn't who I was anymore. The boy who once sought his brother's approval was gone. The man I'd become had learned to stand alone, not in defiance, but in dignity. And then the twist came. One of the senior consultants from Adil's real estate firm scheduled a meeting with my assistant. I assumed it was a routine marketing update, until she whispered, "It's about a proposal for a joint venture." My brow furrowed. "With who?" She paused, looking uncomfortable. "With your brother, Adil." For a long moment, I didn't respond. My heart beat a little faster, but not from panic, from the shock of the full circle. I entered the meeting room 30 minutes later to find Adil already there, seated in front of a digital display showing a proposed co-branded residential project. The ground-up residences in partnership with Crescent Realty. He stood up when I walked in. "Before you say anything," he started, "I know how this looks. It looks bold." I said, sitting down calmly, "You sure you want my company's name on your buildings?" He nodded, his jaw tight. "I do, because what you've built is credible, respected, and because I know I was wrong." The word hung in the air, wrong. I had imagined him saying it in countless hypothetical arguments, but hearing it in this context, so directly, made it feel surreal. This project, he continued, gesturing to the digital model, could be something incredible. I've seen your campaigns. Your branding is sharp, and your market instincts are spot on. We have land and capital. You have audience insight. Together, you want to build what we both couldn't build apart. I finished for him. He nodded again, a bit more humbly. Exactly. I leaned back, studying him. He wasn't there to manipulate or play games. There was sincerity in his tone, and it disarmed me. But I wasn't the same man he kicked out. And if I were to step into this venture, it wouldn't be as a favor. It would be as an equal. We'll need to draw clear lines, I said firmly. This isn't me coming back into the family business. This is my company entering a new partnership. I understand. And I don't want special treatment. just professional respect. My team will lead the branding, marketing, and launch strategy. No interference. You have my word. That night, I stayed up running the numbers, assessing the opportunity. My team was ready. We had the infrastructure, the talent, and the momentum. And despite the complicated history, this project had the potential to put us on the map in ways we hadn't imagined. I signed the preliminary letter of intent 2 days later. The press release went viral. Business journals ran headlines like "Estranged Brothers Unite for $40M Real Estate Launch," and from sibling rift to skyline shift, interviews poured in. Some outlets tried to bait us into talking about our past falling out, but we stayed focused on the vision, 2 companies aligning to create something new for the city. The first blueprint unveiling was held at a high-rise rooftop, with media and investors in attendance. As Adil spoke about the architectural plans, he introduced me with a single line: "None of this would be possible without my brother's creativity and resilience." I stepped forward and took the mic, breathing in the crisp air. "Sometimes," I began, "you don't choose the path you walk. Sometimes it's the shove off the ledge that teaches you how to fly. This project is more than real estate. It's proof that what's broken doesn't always stay broken. It can be built again, stronger, smarter, and with more heart." The applause that followed wasn't just for the project. It was for the journey. That night, as I watched the city lights blink from my new penthouse balcony, one earned by years of grit and self-belief, I thought about the boy I used to be. The one who begged to stay, the one who packed his bags without knowing what tomorrow held, and I smiled, because that boy had become a man who didn't just survive being kicked out, he built a door where there was once a wall. The weeks that followed the launch of our joint real estate venture blurred into a whirlwind of meetings, media attention, investor calls, and client pitches. The name Ground Up Residences began to echo across industry publications, not just for its sleek branding or modern design, but for the unique story behind its creation. People loved the underdog narrative. They were drawn to the irony: a man kicked out by his own brother, now standing shoulder to shoulder with him in one of the most talked-about property deals in the region. But behind the polished press releases and carefully worded interviews, the dynamic between Adil and me remained delicate. Polite, professional, but not yet healed, we sat across from each other in boardrooms and on site visits, exchanged data sheets and signed approvals, but we avoided any mention of the past. It was as if we'd built a glass bridge, functional, transparent, and fragile. Every step forward felt cautious. Every decision carried a silent undertone of how far can we go without breaking this again. Then came the Investor Summit, a high-stakes event where both our companies would present the project roadmap to a group of international backers. The stakes were massive. Securing this funding would mean not only fast-tracking the build phase, but also opening doors to expansion in other cities. The summit was scheduled in Karachi, hosted in a 5-star hotel ballroom, with over 100 industry leaders, media personnel, and analysts in attendance. Our team spent weeks preparing the presentation, rehearsing every detail. But just a night before the event, an unexpected wrench was thrown into our plans. An internal memo from Crescent Realty's financial division got leaked online. An anonymous blog post claimed that the joint venture was a desperate PR move by a failing family firm and a no-name branding agency led by an estranged sibling. The tone was snide, dismissive, and filled with half-truths. The blog post didn't mention names, but the implications were obvious. Worse, the post went viral. Rivals shared it gleefully, anonymous Twitter accounts dissected it, and by the next morning it was all anyone in our industry circle could talk about. When I entered the hotel that morning, the energy had changed. Conversations paused as I passed. Smiles were more measured. Adil looked furious when I arrived, pacing the hallway outside the conference room. He pulled me aside. "I swear I didn't authorize that leak," he said sharply. "One of the junior analysts went rogue. We're handling it internally." I nodded slowly. Damage is already done. Now we prove them wrong. The presentation was scheduled for noon. By the time we took the stage, the room was buzzing with speculation. I could feel it in the way eyes narrowed, how some people didn't bother hiding their skepticism. Adil started with a solid overview, market analysis, ROI predictions, demographic targets. But I could tell it wasn't landing. The numbers were good, but they weren't changing the narrative, not after that leak. So when my turn came, I did something I hadn't planned. I closed the laptop. I was told not to address the blog post. I said calmly into the mic, "But let's be honest, it's already in your group chats, so let me give you the part they didn't write." The room fell into silence. I was kicked out of my brother's house 5 years ago. No money, no job, just an idea that I believed in. I didn't come from a business school or a legacy family firm. I came from a rented apartment and a borrowed laptop. I built my company from freelance gigs and all-nighters, from clients who didn't pay on time, from friends who said, "Bro, don't do this to yourself." But I stayed. I built a team. I built trust. I built something real. I walked forward, making eye contact with a few people in the crowd. They called us a PR move. Fine, maybe we are. But if you look past the headlines, what you'll find is two companies solving a real problem. Accessible, modern housing for Pakistan's rising middle class, with real design, real planning, and real outcomes. We've already pre-sold 40% of Phase 1. We've created over 120 jobs, and the only drama here is that it took a family split to create one of the most efficient partnerships I've ever worked in. I stepped back. Now, if you still think we're just a story, then I invite you to wait 6 months and see what we build. There was silence for a beat, then applause, tentative at first, but then stronger. The tide had shifted. That afternoon, the summit concluded with 3 major investors expressing intent to back the project. One of them, a prominent VC from Dubai, shook my hand and said, "That was the most honest pitch I've heard in years. You're the reason I'm in." Adil and I sat in the lounge afterward, exhausted. He broke the silence. "You know, for a long time I thought I did the right thing back then. Kicking you out, I mean. I thought I was protecting the house, the business, Mom's name." I looked at him, unsure what to say. "But seeing what you've built," he continued, "and hearing you today, I realized I didn't just lose a brother. I lost a damn good partner." I let the words settle. He took a breath. "I won't ask you to forget it, but I hope you know. I'm proud of what you've become. I truly am." I nodded. "Thanks, and I'm proud of what we're building now." That night, back in my hotel room, I looked out at the city skyline, this time not with longing but with clarity. The boy who once stood on the curb with 2 suitcases had become a man who commanded boardrooms. The same brother who told me I wasn't ready was now signing deals under a logo I created. Revenge wasn't loud. It didn't shout. It stood tall in silence and let the world notice. The momentum of our project didn't just continue, it exploded. Within a month of the investor summit, media coverage became relentless. News channels began calling us the brothers behind the boom, and every major real estate blog in the region wanted to feature our company's comeback story. But while the public ate up the headlines, I knew the real challenge had just begun. Securing funding and positive press was one thing. Delivering results in construction, design, and execution, that was the battlefield where reputations were either made or ruined. I threw myself into the work like never before. I was up before dawn, reviewing architectural drafts, overseeing marketing campaigns, coordinating between design and legal teams, and attending endless contractor calls. My company, now nearly 50 employees strong, had transformed from a scrappy creative agency into a full-fledged branding powerhouse and development partner. Every aspect of ground-up residences had our fingerprint: brochures, ads, sales videos, social media rollout, showroom walkthroughs. The first model home we completed became a marketing sensation. Buyers, influencers, and even architects praised our minimal, human-first approach. For the first time in my career, I felt like I was building something bigger than just a paycheck. I was building a legacy. But not everything was smooth. Adil and I still had friction. We didn't argue often, but the tension between our leadership styles became more obvious the deeper we got into the project. I was collaborative, sometimes even overcautious, preferring discussion and refinement before decisions. Adil, on the other hand, remained the bulldozer he'd always been, charging forward, demanding results, and pushing timelines no matter who got steamrolled along the way. That tension hit a boiling point when a delay in permit approvals pushed back the Phase 2 timeline by 3 weeks. Adil stormed into the office, barking at junior staff, pointing fingers and making it clear that he blamed my team. "This is amateur stuff," he said loudly in the conference room. "If you're running this side of the business, own it. We can't afford delays." I stood up, calmly but firmly. We submitted everything on time. The city department flagged the site for additional inspection. "It's out of our hands. But throwing blame doesn't speed up the process." He narrowed his eyes. "I built a company from nothing. I know how to make things move. And I built this one without throwing chairs." I snapped back, voice rising slightly. "You asked me to partner with you because you respect my way. Don't forget that." The room went silent. Adil didn't say another word. He left moments later. Later that day, I found a note on my desk from Sarah, one of my top project leads. "I appreciate you standing up for us. We've got your back." It wasn't just about ego anymore. People were watching. The culture I was building was different from the one I'd left behind years ago, and I wasn't going to let anyone poison it. Still, I knew that if we were going to scale and take on more projects, we had to find a way to lead together or walk away before something broke permanently. That evening, Adil called. "Want to talk," he said quietly. We met at a rooftop cafe away from the office, away from expectations. The city lights flickered below as we nursed cups of strong chai in silence for a few minutes. "You were right earlier," he said eventually. "I lost my temper. I'm not used to having equals. That's on me." I appreciated the honesty. "I get it." I replied, "We're different people, but this partnership, it can't work if we keep slipping into the past." He looked at me thoughtfully. "You think we'd be here if I hadn't kicked you out back then?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I do know that it hurt for a long time, not because of the money or even the roof over my head. It was how disposable I felt." He nodded slowly. "You weren't disposable. I just didn't know how to handle you wanting your own path. We didn't hug it out or cry. We didn't even linger. But something in that conversation shifted. For the first time, it felt like we were two adults trying to understand each other, not just two brothers reliving old wounds. Meanwhile, the project surged ahead. Within 6 months, Phase 1 had sold out. The media continued to highlight our journey, but more importantly, our team became an example for young professionals trying to break into the real estate and design world. I was invited to speak at 2 universities. Adil got approached to do an industry mentorship podcast, but more fulfilling than any of that was watching junior team members blossom under the culture we had built, supportive, challenging, and relentlessly focused on growth. Then something happened that reminded me how fragile success really is. One of the newly hired contractors miscalculated a foundation lay out on Lot 7. It wasn't catastrophic, but it caused a delay that could ripple into client delivery timelines. While our teams worked overtime to fix it, a rival company tried to use the incident as a weapon. They published a piece online suggesting that ground-up residences was cutting corners and overpromising on timelines to secure sales. It was a hit job, and it stung. I wanted to go public, defend our name, post receipts, and fight back, but Adil stopped me. "Sometimes silence is strategy," he said. "Fix the problem, let the work speak." And we did. 3 weeks later, we invited clients and press to visit the site and view the fixed work firsthand. We didn't need press statements. We just showed them the quality, and the backlash evaporated. I realized something then. Adil had changed too, not completely, but in his own way. He wasn't just about domination anymore. He was learning to lead with patience. Maybe working with me had softened his edges the way building alone had sharpened mine. At the 1-year mark, we hosted a celebration at the main sales office. Our clients, staff, partners, and even family were invited. Mom showed up, eyes glowing with pride, hugging us both. She whispered in my ear, "You did it. You really did it." Adil stood up midway through the event and clinked his glass for a toast. "I've built a lot of things in my life," he said, "but nothing has taught me more about trust, humility, and second chances than this last year. I want to thank someone who didn't just show up, but who led, my brother." The applause was thunderous as I stood there, glass raised, looking around the room filled with laughter, lights, and life. I realized this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about redemption. We hadn't just built homes. We had rebuilt something far harder, family. 6 months after the celebration at the sales office, life began to take on a new rhythm. Steady, confident, and grounded. What had started as a high-stakes partnership built on fragile trust was now evolving into something deeper, more stable. Adil and I, once brothers torn apart by pride and resentment, were finally finding what we had never managed in all our years: harmony. We were not just tolerating each other in business. We were thriving together. The second phase of ground-up residences had already broken ground, and thanks to the success of the first, we had attracted an even wider pool of investors, media, and buyers. The project became a case study for business schools, particularly those interested in family-run startups and redemption narratives. But beneath all the public success and accolades, I knew there was still something we hadn't addressed, something that quietly lived in the shadow of our partnership, the unspoken past. Adil still hadn't visited the apartment where I had lived after he threw me out. He had never asked about those years, about how I managed, who helped me, what I had to sacrifice to get here, and I never pushed it. Maybe I feared that dragging the past into the present might disturb the peace we'd finally found. But that changed on a rainy Friday afternoon. We were reviewing contractor updates in the downtown office when a staff member casually mentioned the site of an upcoming affordable housing pilot we were backing as part of our community reinvestment program. The neighborhood was familiar to me, too familiar. It was the very same block I had moved to years ago after being kicked out of my brother's house, that grimy little apartment over a noisy mechanic shop. The place that had seen me at my lowest. I hadn't returned since. Adil looked over the files, then at me. "You know this area." I paused. "Yeah, I lived there for a while, after you told me to leave." The room went silent. Even the hum of the AC seemed to pause. Adil slowly closed the file, his fingers tapping at once. "Take me there," he said. I blinked. "Now?" He nodded. "Yeah, now." We got in his SUV, neither of us speaking as we drove through winding back streets and cracked roads, past the familiar food stalls and the broken signposts that hadn't changed in years. When we arrived outside the old building, I felt a strange mix of discomfort and nostalgia. The place looked even smaller than I remembered, the paint more chipped, the doorway more crooked. I led Adil up the narrow stairs to the second floor, where I had rented a single-room studio for 2 years. The door was locked and occupied by someone else now, but I didn't need to go inside. I pointed to the window. That was mine. Didn't have much. Just a mattress, desk, kettle, and a bulb that flickered every time it rained. Adil was silent, taking it in. His jaw tightened slightly. "I used to sit by that window." I continued, "watching your house lights across the hill, wondering if you missed me, wondering if I deserved it." He turned to me, his voice quiet. "You didn't." I looked at him, surprised. I was scared. He said, "You were getting smarter, braver. You didn't need me anymore, and that terrified me. I thought if I pushed you out, I could stay on top. I thought I was protecting the business, but I was just protecting my ego." I let his words settle. This was the moment I had secretly wanted for years. Not to humiliate him or make him grovel, but to hear the truth, raw and unfiltered, and he gave it. "I used to think you were lucky," I said. "Born confident, given everything, but now I see that maybe you were carrying your own fears just like I was." He nodded. "It doesn't excuse what I did, but I hope this work, this company, is a kind of apology." "It is," I said. "But this visit means more." He smiled faintly. "You always were the poetic one." We left without needing to say more. The silence in the car was different now. It wasn't filled with avoidance or shame. It was full of understanding. When we got back to the office, I noticed the way our team interacted with us. More at ease, more trusting. They'd always respected our leadership, but now they could sense something deeper, unity. As the months rolled on, our business expanded. We were invited to lead urban redevelopment projects in 2 major cities. Our model homes were featured in international architecture magazines. One night, at an award gala where ground-up residences won Real Estate Partnership of the Year, Adil pulled me aside before we went on stage. "I'm thinking of stepping back from the operational role," he said. I turned to him, surprised. "You're better with the team. You build loyalty. I build pressure. I want to take on a chairman role, let you run the day-to-day." It was the ultimate gesture of trust. The man who once thought I wasn't ready for a couch under his roof was now handing me the keys to the empire we had built together. I shook his hand. "Let's do it." The announcement made headlines, and not one article questioned his decision. The public had seen my leadership. They'd seen our work, and they believed in us. One day, my mother visited our corporate HQ for the first time. She walked through the marble lobby with wide eyes, took photos of every wall logo, and hugged the receptionist twice. Then, as I showed her my office, she paused by the glass wall that overlooked the city skyline. "You were always meant to lead," she said. "Even when you were a boy, you were never afraid of starting over." I smiled. Maybe because I always knew I'd land somewhere better. That night, I went home and looked through an old journal I kept during the years in that small apartment. Scribbled dreams, desperate notes, goals, budgets, raw feelings. And on the final page, in faded ink, one line stood out: "One day, I'll build something they can't deny." And I had, not to prove them wrong, but to prove to myself that I was never a mistake, never disposable, and always meant for more. Looking back now, it's surreal to think about how far I've come. From sleeping in a cramped one-room apartment with a leaky faucet and a broken heater, to standing in a corner office overlooking the skyline of a city I once felt exiled from. It's not just a journey of business success, it's a journey of healing, redemption, and quiet strength. When Adil kicked me out of his house, I didn't just lose a roof. I lost a sense of belonging. I lost trust in family, in brotherhood, and for a time in myself. But sometimes getting thrown out is the very thing that sets you free. Had he never turned me away, I might never have learned the resilience that built my business. I might never have discovered the creative grit that became the soul of our brand. I might never have formed the team that became my second family. And strangely enough, I might never have had the chance to rebuild the relationship with my brother on real terms. Terms built on respect, not hierarchy, on trust, not control. The business flourished, yes, but more importantly, I flourished. I evolved from the younger sibling, always seeking approval, into a leader who no longer needed validation to feel whole. My confidence no longer depended on being included at someone else's table. I learned how to build my own. And Adil, he changed too. He started listening more, letting go more. He stopped acting like the only one with answers and started asking better questions. We both had to shed parts of ourselves we had clung to for too long. The pride, the blame, the idea that love should only come after loyalty is proven. We found peace not just in business, but in being able to look each other in the eye and say, "I see you, and I'm glad you're here." Today we co-own multiple ventures. Our name is associated with innovation, transparency, and transformation. But whenever someone compliments our company, I smile, not because of the numbers on the balance sheet, but because of the unseen story behind every brick and logo. A story of rejection and risk, of nights I nearly gave up, of mornings I started again anyway. A story that proves success isn't just built on opportunities. Sometimes it's built on closed doors and silent tears. I walk into meetings now not just as someone who made it, but as someone who understands what it's like to be counted out. I speak at conferences not just about strategy, but about second chances. I hire people who were once overlooked, just like I was, because I know what it feels like to be told you don't belong. And I've made it my mission to make sure someone else never has to feel that way again. At least not in my house. Forgiveness was not weakness. It was power reclaimed, and building my business wasn't revenge. It was redemption. Sometimes the greatest empires rise not from privilege, but from pain. And sometimes the person you thought abandoned you becomes the reason you learn how to fly.